My name is Cassidy Taylor Brooks, and for most of my life, I thought family would always have your back. It wasn't just some nice idea, I truly believed it. But that belief died the moment my grandmother, Helen, collapsed and passed away from a sudden heart attack. It wasn't just the shock of losing someone so important to me, it was what came after. A week later, in a small, unremarkable law office in Blaine, Minnesota, I sat with my parents and brother, waiting for the attorney to read out Grandma's will. This was it. This was the moment we would hear her final wishes. And I had been holding on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, Grandma would leave me something, a piece of her legacy, her knowledge, or at least a token of the love I'd felt from her all my life. But as the attorney read her will out loud, it was clear that hope was misplaced. Every asset, her house, her 2 rental properties, her stock portfolio, everything was left to my younger brother, Dylan. I wasn't mentioned even once. Not a word. My name was absent from the entire document, and it felt like a punch to the gut. My parents, sitting beside me, exchanged smug, knowing glances. There it was, their moment of victory. For years, they had been planning for this. They were so sure I would stay silent, so confident in their victory, they didn't even try to hide their smiles. Dylan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, nodding slowly like he had already won the lottery. He was already counting the money in his head. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My heart was racing, my chest tight. I felt nothing but emptiness. But I did the only thing I could. I closed the folder, walked out of the room, and flew back to Austin the next morning. That was the last time I saw my parents and Dylan for a while. 3 days later, my phone rang, showing a Minnesota number I didn't recognize. It was the same attorney, Susan Grant. What she told me next wiped the smiles off my parents' faces and turned every dollar they thought was theirs into something that legally belonged to me before the ink had even dried on Dylan's inheritance papers. But before I tell you exactly what happened, let me explain a little more about the years leading up to that moment. Growing up in Blaine, Minnesota, was something out of a small-town cliché. Every lawn looked the same, meticulously mowed with the occasional garden gnome for personality. The biggest drama in our subdivision was which kid made the travel hockey team. And every year, Dylan made it. Every year, he was the star. It wasn't a surprise to anyone, except maybe me. My parents, Nathan and Christine Brooks, poured everything they had into Dylan. He was their golden boy. At 8 years old, he was already getting private coaching. At 16, they handed him the keys to a brand new Subaru WRX with a bow on top, and the neighbors clapped as if they were at a parade. His allowance? $500 a month. No questions asked. But me? I worked for everything. From the age of 14, I took jobs. Shelving books at the public library, working weekends at the local coffee shop, and by my junior year of high school, I was babysitting 3 nights a week until midnight. Every dollar I earned went straight into a savings account, so I could pay for the extracurriculars my parents said weren't priorities, things like the debate club trip and new running shoes for track. I remember asking my mom why Dylan got everything handed to him while I had to work for every little thing. Her response was always the same. Dylan needed the confidence boost. I, on the other hand, was already self-sufficient. I'd learned that lesson early. Nothing was ever for me unless I earned it. The only place where I ever felt seen was at my grandmother's house. Grandma Helen lived in a split-level house, just 3 streets over from us. Every Friday after school, she would pick me up in her old Buick, and I'd stay the weekend with her. We would cook spaghetti with way too much garlic, watch old black and white movies, and sit at her kitchen table as she spread out bank statements and property tax bills like she was playing cards. She taught me everything about managing money, about how compound interest worked, how to read a deed, and why owning rental properties was far more reliable than the stock market. She even taught me how to read between the lines in a will, why legal documents matter, and how to make sure no one could ever take advantage of you. Every time I asked why my parents didn't teach me any of this, she would tap the table twice and say, "Because you're the one who listens, Cassidy. You're the one I trust to carry it forward." I cherished those weekends. They were the only time I felt seen, heard, and valued. Grandma Helen was the only adult who showed up for me consistently. She came to my debate tournaments, my robotics fairs, no matter how far or inconvenient. She was always there with a camera in hand, cheering louder than anyone else. Dylan, on the other hand, my parents never missed a single one of his games, even his practices. But not me. I was the invisible one. I still remember feeling a pang in my chest each time my parents would gush over Dylan's accomplishments. Every trophy, every win, every moment was about him. For years, I thought it didn't matter, but deep down, it hurt. The older I got, the more I realized that my success didn't matter to them. It was always about Dylan. As much as I tried to ignore the sting of being overlooked by my family, I couldn't escape the reality of it. My life in Austin was my escape, my fresh start. After I graduated from college, I found a job as a software engineer at a tech firm, something I never thought I'd land, considering the amount of debt I had from school. But I was determined to prove myself. I threw myself into the work, pouring hours into tough projects, staying late, and constantly striving to exceed expectations. Slowly, I climbed from junior engineer to a mid-level role, earning a salary I had only dreamed of before. At 29, I bought my first property, a modest 2-bedroom condo in South Austin, and I paid for everything with my own hard-earned money. But even in Austin, with my new life, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The calls from my family started coming in small requests at first. My mom asked if I could lend Dylan some money for his rent, just until the inheritance from Grandma's estate cleared probate. She assured me it would be a short-term thing. When I told her no, she just laughed it off, saying we'd talk soon. A few weeks later, another call came. This time, it was my dad, asking for $8,000 to cover Dylan's tuition at a private recording arts program. I reminded him that the inheritance would cover all that, but he mumbled something about estate taxes and cash flow problems. Again, I said no. That didn't sit well with them. The requests kept coming. My mom texted asking for a new MacBook Pro because Dylan's laptop had broken right before a big music showcase. My heart sank as I thought about how hard I had worked to pay off my own student loans. I politely reminded her I wasn't in a position to help. She replied with a simple thumbs up emoji and then nothing. A few days after that, Dylan started texting me directly. He sent photos of him at rooftop bars, wearing new leather jackets, sitting behind the wheel of a leased Audi Q5. The captions were smug. Grandma would have wanted this. And thanks for the support, sis. He even Venmo'd me a request for $2,000 labeled Studio Time Family Discount. I ignored him, but it didn't stop there. The guilt trips started. My mom left a voicemail, accusing me of being selfish. She said I had forgotten where I came from, that blood is thicker than water. The next day, Dad sent me an email explaining that Dylan was struggling emotionally after losing Grandma, and that he just needed stability. The tone shifted, and soon, the calls weren't just requests, they were demands. "You're not being a real sister," my mom shouted at me one evening. "Grandma would be disappointed in you. You're punishing the whole family." Dad, always more subtle, started to play the victim too. He said that I had been the one to leave them behind, that I'd abandoned the family the moment I moved to Austin. He made me feel like I was the one being unreasonable, not them. I didn't know how to respond to their manipulation, so I stopped responding altogether. It was painful, especially since Grandma Helen had always made me feel like I mattered. But my parents, Dylan, they didn't see me. They saw a bank account, a tool for getting what they wanted. And that was something I couldn't ignore anymore. I turned off my phone and went back to work. Life in Austin finally felt like mine. But things never stay quiet for long. 2 years after Grandma's funeral, I was at work, sipping my morning coffee and reviewing some code, when the phone buzzed on my desk. The caller ID showed a Minnesota number I didn't recognize. My stomach turned. I had blocked my family's numbers long ago, so who could this be? I hesitated, but something pushed me to answer. Cassidy Brooks? The voice was familiar, calm, professional. It was Susan Grant, the attorney who had read the will. "I have some important information regarding your grandmother's estate. Do you have a moment?" I froze. The last time I'd heard from Susan was when she'd read Grandma's will, when I thought everything was over. But what she said next turned my entire world upside down. "There's a second set of estate documents," Susan explained. "Your grandmother executed a revocable living trust 9 years ago, and she named you as the sole successor beneficiary. She also executed transfer on death deeds for all the properties, and payable on death designations for all the bank and brokerage accounts." My mind raced. I couldn't process it. Grandma had left me something after all, something my parents had no idea about. The house, The duplex, the condo, the brokerage accounts, everything was mine. It had already transferred the moment Grandma passed away. Susan continued, "The will you read with your family? That was a decoy, Cassidy. Your grandmother wanted to see how your parents would react, thinking they had won." My heart started to race as Susan's words sank in. My grandmother had known exactly what my parents would do. She had left them nothing and protected me in a way they could never fight. It wasn't just about the inheritance, it was about protecting me from people who had never truly seen me. I couldn't believe it. The house in Blaine, the rental properties, the stocks, everything had legally belonged to me from the moment Grandma Helen passed. Susan then dropped the bombshell that would change everything. "They're living in your property. You can send them a notice to vacate. If they refuse, we'll file an eviction action. The law is on your side." That was it. I had the power now. I wasn't just the quiet, invisible sister anymore. I was the one who would take control. That evening, I sat on my couch staring at the documents Susan had sent me. The trust, the deeds, the proof that everything Grandma had left had been legally transferred to me all along. I had a choice to make. I could continue ignoring the situation, letting my parents and Dylan continue to manipulate me, or I could finally take what was mine. I took a deep breath. It was time to act. The decision was made. I wasn't going to be the quiet, invisible one anymore. I had worked too hard to get where I was, and I wasn't going to let my parents and Dylan tear that down. I booked a flight back to Minnesota, determined to take control. I wasn't about to tell my parents what was happening. I didn't owe them an explanation. They had already made their intentions clear. Grandma Helen had seen it coming, and she protected me in a way no one else ever had. When I landed in Minneapolis, I felt like I was walking into battle. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I printed out the trust documents, the transfer on death deeds, and the official records. I had everything ready. I didn't know exactly how they would react, but I was sure they wouldn't take it well. I rented a gray sedan and drove straight to the house on 109th Avenue, the one my parents had lived in for decades, the house I had grown up in, the one they'd never let me have, but now it was mine. When I got there, Susan Grant was already waiting in the driveway, folder in hand, looking professional as always. A deputy from the Anoka County Sheriff's Office stood by his marked SUV, arms folded, ready for standby. The locksmith was beside his van, waiting to change the locks once this was over. Everything was set. I had the legal documents in hand, and I had a plan. I rang the doorbell once, and it felt like the longest moment of my life. I could hear footsteps coming from inside. My dad opened the door, a coffee mug halfway to his mouth, looking disoriented. His face froze when he saw the deputy standing behind me. Mom appeared in the hallway a second later, her robe still on. Dylan came down the stairs in socks, his hair a mess, phone in hand. They hadn't seen this coming. None of them had. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The air felt thick, charged with the tension of years of unspoken resentment. "Dad," I said, holding out the notice packet, "this is a formal notice to vacate the premises within 30 days. The property transferred to me the day Grandma passed away. You are occupying my house without a lease, without my permission, and without legal grounds. You have 30 days to leave voluntarily." For a moment, no one said anything. The room was silent, except for the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. My dad's face drained of color, and my mom snatched the papers from my hand, flipping through them like they were something foreign. Dylan, of course, tried to laugh it off at first. He looked at me, disbelief in his eyes, and said, "You're joking, right? This is a prank?" He was trying to regain control, trying to act like this didn't matter. But I wasn't buying it. Susan Grant stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, the revocable living trust and the transfer on death deeds are matters of public record. I have certified copies here. The updated title reflects Cassidy Brooks as the sole owner of this property. You have no legal interest in it." It was like a slap in the face. Dylan stopped laughing. Mom found her voice first. "This is insane! We've lived here for 25 years! You can't just throw us out!" She was shaking now, clutching the papers to her chest like they were the only thing keeping her grounded. "I'm not throwing you out today," I said. "You have 30 days to leave voluntarily. After that, I'll file an eviction action and the sheriff will execute it. It's your choice." Dylan's anger flared. His face turned red, and he lunged forward, fists clenched. You're doing this because you're jealous. You got nothing, and now you're stealing what's mine. His voice cracked, but there was no real conviction behind his words, just desperation. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm taking back what was always mine. Grandma Helen signed these documents 9 years ago because she knew exactly what you three would do the second she was gone. She protected me the only way she could. Dad opened his mouth, trying to argue, but Susan Grant cut him off. You are welcome to hire counsel, but I assure you, these instruments were drafted to withstand challenge. There's no probate estate to contest. The transfers are complete. Any attempt to fight this will only delay the inevitable. The deputy shifted his weight, a quiet reminder of why he was there. I took one step farther into the foyer, close enough that they had no choice but to look at me. For 29 years, I watched you pour everything into Dylan and act like I didn't exist. You skipped my events. You made me pay for my own books. You told me I was selfish for wanting the same chances he got handed. I paused, and then the words came more firmly than I expected. When Grandma died, you couldn't hide your smiles fast enough because you thought you finally won. You thought I would stay quiet, like always. Well, I'm not quiet anymore. Mom dropped to her knees, sobbing harder now. Cassidy, please, think of family. Please don't do this. I'm done thinking of family, I said coldly. The house, the rentals, the accounts, everything legally mine. You have 30 days to pack. Anything left behind becomes my property. No extensions, no negotiations, no second chances. Dad's face went from shock to rage. He started threatening me with the police, but the deputy stepped forward, clearing his throat to remind him of who was really in charge. Dylan kept shouting insults, but they didn't matter anymore. I wasn't going to back down. I turned to the locksmith. Change every lock once they're out. Install a full security system by Monday. With that, I left. I didn't look back. The days that followed were almost surreal. It was as if the moment I walked out of that house, leaving my family behind, everything that had weighed on me for years was finally lifted. I had stepped into a new chapter, one where I didn't feel invisible anymore, where I wasn't a tool for everyone else's benefit. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control. The quiet strength that had always been inside me, buried under years of neglect and manipulation, had finally come to the surface. I wasn't afraid to take up space. I wasn't afraid to fight for what I deserved. The 30 days passed quickly, and with it, the last remnants of my family's hold on me. They tried everything: late-night voicemails, texts from unknown numbers, emails full of guilt and anger. Dylan sent me a voice message begging for forgiveness, apologizing for how he'd acted, asking me to help him get back into school. It was the same old manipulative tactic, but this time, it didn't move me. I blocked him immediately. Mom sent a 4-page email about family responsibility, about how Grandma Helen would be ashamed of me for what I was doing. Dad followed up with a shorter one, asking for a loan to get them through the next few months. I read both once, then deleted them without responding. They had made their choices years ago. Now, I was making mine. By the 28th day, the moving truck arrived. The house was emptied, save for a few forgotten boxes in the garage. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I knew what that house meant to them, but it wasn't mine anymore. It was never theirs to begin with. It was the final reminder of the family who never saw me, never valued me, and now it was just a property I'd never have to think about again. 6 months later, life in Austin had finally started to feel like mine in every sense. I had bought my new loft with the proceeds from selling the house and the rentals. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. The place had high ceilings and a stunning view of Lady Bird Lake, a place I could finally call home. The condo in South Austin was sold too, along with the duplex and the condo in Blaine. The sale was quick, clean offers and cash in escrow. I hired a property management company to handle the rental income, which paid for itself and then some. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's greed had given me the tools to build the life I'd always wanted. At work, I kept pushing myself. My title changed to Senior Software Engineer, and with it came the freedom I had longed for: financial stability, independence, and the confidence to take on even bigger projects. I had learned to fight for what was mine. No more pretending I didn't matter. But even with all the success, there was always that lingering thought of what had been taken from me. My parents and Dylan never seemed to change. They still tried to reach out, still tried to manipulate me into feeling guilty for cutting them off, but I had come to terms with it. One day, I came home from work to find a new letter from my mom sitting on my doorstep. I opened it, half expecting the usual lecture about how I was selfish. But this time, it was different. There was no anger, no threats, it was just a long apology. My mom wrote that she finally understood how unfair everything had been, that she was sorry for all the years of neglect, for all the ways she had made me feel invisible. She even said that she regretted not seeing my value earlier, and that she hoped I could forgive her one day. It was the first time I'd seen any real remorse from her. But it was too late. I didn't respond. A few weeks later, Dylan reached out again. This time, it was through a new number. His message was different from the others. There were no sarcastic remarks, no insults, just an apology. He admitted that he had been wrong and asked if I could help him get back into school, get his life together. He said, "You're the only family I have left." I stared at the message for a long time, reading it over and over again. A part of me wanted to forgive him, wanted to believe that things could change, that maybe, just maybe, he was finally seeing the truth, but I knew better. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was just desperate because he'd lost everything, and I wasn't going to let myself be the safety net for his irresponsibility. I blocked his number. It wasn't about holding a grudge or being petty. It was about protecting myself. The family I had once longed for, one that would support me and be there for me, wasn't the family I had. They had shown me, over and over again, that they only cared when it benefited them. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. My life was mine now. I had learned how to stand up for myself, how to stop pretending I didn't matter, how to fight for what I deserved. Grandma Helen's lessons I had nearly forgotten had come back to me when I needed them most. She had always known I was the one who would protect what she built. She had known I was the one who would stand up for myself when everyone else tried to tear me down. And I did. For years, I had let my family's manipulation define me. But now, I defined myself. No longer would I be the one who was overlooked, the one who didn't matter. I was Cassidy Taylor Brooks, and I had built my own life. I was more than just the invisible child in a family that never cared. I was more than the quiet one who always kept her head down. I was the one who would fight back. And I had won. If you've ever been the invisible kid, the one who worked harder than anyone else but never seemed to get the recognition, this story is for you. You don't have to let anyone make you feel small. You don't have to settle for being overlooked. You are worthy of respect. And sometimes, quiet strength wins in the end. Family is not just about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who believes in you, and who has your back when it matters most. And if you're lucky enough to have those people, hold them close. If anything in the story hit close to home, let me know in the comments. Your city, your story, whatever feels right. And if you believe that respect matters more than blood, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. I read every comment. Thank you for sticking with me until the very last word.